There's a version of you that never says the thing you actually mean. Not because you're dishonest, not because you don't know what you think, but because somewhere between the thought forming and the mouth opening, something intervenes. A calculation, a risk assessment, a quiet, almost automatic process that measures the cost of saying what's true against the cost of staying comfortable, and almost always chooses comfortable. You nod when you disagree. You laugh at things that aren't funny to you. You let conversations go in directions that feel wrong without redirecting them. You agree to things you don't want to agree to. You swallow the sentence that needed to be said and replace it with something softer, something safer, something that will keep the peace for another day. And you tell yourself this is kindness, this is maturity, this is knowing how to get along with people. This is emotional intelligence, not reacting to every little thing, not making everything into a confrontation, not being difficult. But there's something underneath that story that doesn't quite believe it, something that notices with uncomfortable accuracy that the peace you're keeping is not the peace of resolution, it's the peace of postponement, of swallowed words and unaired disagreements accumulating in the body like sediment. The peace of a person who has made themselves smaller and smaller in the interest of being acceptable, and who wakes up sometimes at odd hours in the middle of ordinary days with the dim, unsettling awareness that they have been slowly disappearing. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this. He understood it not as a personal failing, not as a character weakness, but as a systemic problem, a feature of a certain kind of culture and a certain kind of morality that teaches people with great sincerity, with genuine good intentions, that conflict is bad, that harmony is always preferable to friction, that the good person is the smooth person, the one who accommodates, the one who doesn't push back, the one who in the interest of peace makes themselves so agreeable that they eventually cease to be themselves at all. He had no patience for this, not the impatient contempt of someone who doesn't understand the fear, but the urgent, sharp impatience of someone who sees exactly what the cost is and refuses to pretend the cost is acceptable. Nietzsche was himself a profoundly confrontational thinker, not confrontational in the way of someone who enjoys fighting for its own sake, but in the way of someone who believed that truth, genuine thought, genuine selfhood, and genuine freedom are all impossible without the willingness to collide with what resists you, with ideas that push back, with people who see things differently, with your own comfortable assumptions that turn out under pressure to be borrowed rather than built. He wrote with a hammer. He described himself that way, not a weapon, a philosopher's tool for testing what's solid and what's hollow. And what he found when he tapped at the foundations of modern moral culture was that much of what was presented as virtue was actually fear, that the avoidance of conflict dressed itself as gentleness, that the refusal to assert genuine selfhood presented itself as humility, that people were being quietly destroyed by a moral framework that praised them for disappearing. This video is about that, about what Nietzsche actually said about conflict, not as aggression, not as dominance, not as the brute clashing of egos, but as a necessary condition of freedom, of genuine selfhood, of a life that is actually, specifically, irreplaceably yours. What follows is not comfortable, but Nietzsche would say that's appropriate. Discomfort, as you're about to understand very deeply, is not the enemy. It's often the beginning of the only path worth walking. Before we get into what Nietzsche says about the necessity of conflict, we need to spend real time understanding what conflict avoidance actually is. Because most people who practice it and most people do in one form or another, have a story about it that doesn't quite match the reality. The story usually goes something like this: I avoid conflict because I care about other people, because I don't want to hurt anyone, because relationships matter to me, and fighting damages relationships, because I've seen what happens when people can't get along, and I don't want to contribute to that, because I'm the kind of person who prioritizes connection over being right. This story is not entirely false, but it is, in most cases, significantly incomplete, and the part it leaves out is the part that Nietzsche would insist you look at directly. The primary engine of conflict avoidance is not love, it is fear. Fear of what? Not the same thing for everyone, but the fears cluster in recognizable patterns. Fear of rejection, the deeply wired terror that if you assert yourself, if you say no, if you disagree, if you hold a position that causes friction, the person on the other side of that friction will leave, will withdraw their approval, will like you less, value you less, keep you less close. The fear is not irrational. Human beings are social creatures. The threat of exclusion, of losing connection, of being pushed out of the group, these are among the most powerful motivators in our psychology. They run deep. They often run deeper than we realize. Fear of being seen as difficult. There is a specific social category, difficult person, that carries enormous weight in most cultures. The person who pushes back, who asks why, who doesn't go along, who makes things complicated. Most people have absorbed, through years of social feedback, a profound aversion to being seen this way. The label difficult carries the implication of not being worth the trouble, of being a problem rather than a solution, of the kind of person that others work around rather than toward. The fear of this label causes an enormous amount of self-silencing. Fear of the conflict itself, of the experience of open disagreement, of raised voices, of the specific physical and emotional discomfort of direct confrontation. Some of this is temperament, some of it is learned from early experiences where conflict was genuinely dangerous or damaging. For many people, the body's response to even the possibility of conflict is visceral and immediate, a tightening, a rushing of adrenaline, a strong and automatic urge to de-escalate, smooth over, retreat. The discomfort is so immediately present and so physically compelling that avoidance seems less like a choice and more like a survival instinct. And underneath all of these, in many cases, the deepest fear. The fear of finding out that what you think, what you want, what you are, is not worth fighting for. That if you actually put your genuine self into the arena of disagreement, it will be found wanting. That other people's objections will reveal something about your position or about you that you're not prepared to face. Nietzsche had a word for the accumulated product of this kind of fear-driven self-suppression, ressentiment. It's worth spending time on because it's one of his most precise and most useful ideas, and because it describes something that happens in conflict-avoiding people with remarkable reliability. Ressentiment is what happens when the energy of genuine selfhood, the drive to assert, to push, to meet the world on your own terms, finds no legitimate outward expression, when it is blocked repeatedly by fear, when every genuine impulse towards self-assertion is intercepted by the calculation of cost and redirected into accommodation, when the person who actually disagrees pretends to agree again and again until the disagreement calcifies into something darker. It curdles, it turns inward, it becomes a low, persistent, pervasive resentment, not directed at any single person or situation, but distributed across the whole landscape of your social world, a background bitterness, a sense of being quietly wronged by everyone you're being so carefully agreeable toward. A specific kind of anger that has no legitimate target because you've been so careful not to give it one, and so it leaks out sideways, in passive aggression, in the quiet withdrawal of genuine engagement, in the cynicism that develops around human relationships when you've spent too long maintaining them at the cost of your own honesty. And here is the thing that Nietzsche would want you to sit with. The people you're being agreeable toward, the people whose approval you're protecting yourself from losing by swallowing every disagreement, they feel this. Not consciously, often, not articulately, but at the level of actual human experience, there is a difference between being around someone who is genuinely engaged, who brings themselves, including the parts that sometimes push back, and being around someone who is managing you, someone who is agreeable in the smooth, effortful way that people are agreeable when they're performing peace rather than feeling it. The relationships built on managed agreeableness are not deep relationships. They cannot be, because depth requires the kind of genuine contact that only happens when two actual selves actually meet, and two actual selves, when they meet, will inevitably have friction, will inevitably see things differently, will inevitably need to navigate genuine disagreement. The relationship that cannot contain this, that requires one or both people to make themselves smaller in order to function, is not a relationship between two people. It's a relationship between a person and a performance. Nietzsche's diagnosis of conflict avoidance was not moral. He wasn't saying you should be braver, stop being a coward, grow a spine. He was saying something more structural, more sympathetic, and ultimately more useful. The avoidance of conflict is the avoidance of selfhood. The two are not separable. A self that never asserts itself, that never occupies space, never holds a position under pressure, never risks the friction of genuine contact with another genuine self, is not a self in any meaningful sense. It is a surface, a set of accommodations in the shape of a person. And you cannot be free in any sense that matters if you are a surface. Freedom requires depth, requires the specific, particular, hard-won substance of a self that has been willing to be met and to push back when pushing back was necessary. This is what Nietzsche means when he talks about freedom in relation to conflict. Not the freedom to fight with everyone, not the freedom to be aggressive or domineering or gratuitously difficult. The freedom that comes from being genuinely yourself, from having a self, a real one with real positions and real values and real responses, rather than a series of strategic accommodations. And that freedom, he insists, is impossible without a willingness to engage with conflict, not to seek it out, not to manufacture it, but not to run from it when it arrives, to be able to stay in the disagreement, in the friction, in the discomfort of genuine contact, without defaulting immediately to whatever version of yourself generates the least resistance. Let's look now at exactly why conflict, in Nietzsche's framework, is not the enemy of freedom, but its prerequisite. Here is something most people never experience: the feeling of knowing with certainty what they actually think about something. Not what they're supposed to think, not what makes sense to say in this particular company, not the position that will generate the least friction, what they actually think, arrived at through genuine engagement, genuine reflection, genuine contact with opposing ideas, and held with the kind of confidence that comes not from certainty that you're right, but from the clarity that comes from having actually worked the question. Most people never have this experience because most people never create the conditions that make it possible. And the primary condition that makes it possible is precisely what most people spend enormous energy avoiding: genuine intellectual and personal conflict. Here's the mechanism Nietzsche identified with extraordinary precision. A belief that has never been challenged is not genuinely held, it is merely occupied. It sits in the mind without roots, without the structural support that comes from having been tested and survived. You can have a position on almost anything, on politics, on relationships, on what matters in life, on who you are. And if that position has never encountered serious resistance, never been forced to defend itself, never had to actually meet and defeat opposing arguments, then it is not truly yours. It is an inheritance, a borrowed conclusion, a position you occupy the way you occupy a chair, without having built it, without knowing how it holds weight, without understanding what it's actually made of. This matters enormously for how you live, because a person who doesn't know what they actually think, who has a collection of unexamined positions rather than genuinely held beliefs, is not a person who can make genuinely free choices. Every decision that depends on values, on priorities, on a sense of what actually matters, and most of the important decisions do, requires access to beliefs that are genuinely yours, that you've worked for, that have been tested and have held. Conflict is how beliefs get tested, not polite conversation, not the exchange of mutually reinforcing opinions with people who already agree with you, the genuine encounter with someone who sees things differently, who pushes back, who makes you articulate why you believe what you believe at a level of specificity that ambient agreement never requires. Nietzsche described this process through his philosophy of what he called agonal culture, from the Greek agon, meaning contest, competition, struggle. He looked at ancient Greece, particularly at the culture that produced the great tragedians, the great philosophers, the great athletes, and he saw a civilization organized around productive contest. Not competition as zero-sum destruction, but competition as the engine of excellence. Two opposing forces, two opposing ideas, two opposing perspectives meeting with full intensity, and in the meeting, both becoming more refined, more developed, more genuinely themselves than either would have been without the encounter. He saw in Homer's heroes not savages, but human beings who understood that identity is forged in contest, that you cannot know the quality of your character until it has been genuinely tested, that the friendships worth having are the ones between people who have genuinely disagreed and come through it, that ideas worth believing are the ones that survive contact with their best opposition. This is not a romantic or antiquarian point. It is a living psychological truth, and you can verify it in your own experience if you're willing to be honest about it. Think about the beliefs you hold most lightly, the ones you could change tomorrow without great cost. Chances are these are beliefs you've never had to defend, never had to articulate fully, never had to meet at the level of genuine argument. Now think about the beliefs you hold most deeply, the ones that feel genuinely integrated into who you are, that you've actually built your life around. How did those become solid? Almost certainly through some form of genuine testing,
through encounters with people who challenged them, through periods of genuine uncertainty where you had to actually work out what you thought rather than just accepting what was given, through the specific kind of friction that forces articulation, and articulation forces clarity. The person who avoids conflict is, among other things, a person who is protecting their beliefs from the very process that would tell them which ones are worth protecting, who is preserving positions without discovering which ones have actual structural integrity, who is maintaining a kind of intellectual comfort that comes at the direct expense of intellectual substance. And this extends beyond beliefs into something more fundamental, the sense of self. The self, in Nietzsche's view, is not a fixed essence waiting to be discovered. It is something built, created, developed through encounter with resistance. The self is, in a profound sense, what remains when genuine pressure has been applied and endured. What survives the challenge is real. What doesn't survive it was never really yours. But you can only learn this by applying the pressure, by being willing to let yourself be challenged, really challenged, not the comfortable quasi-challenge of conversations with people who fundamentally agree with you, and finding out what holds and what gives way. The person who refuses all conflict never has this experience. They never find out what they're made of because they never create the conditions that would reveal it. They live in a kind of permanent identity uncertainty, not knowing who they actually are because they've never allowed the conditions that would show them. And this uncertainty, this hollow sense of not quite knowing the shape of your own self, is one of the primary sources of the specific suffering that conflict avoidance is supposed to prevent. You avoid conflict to protect yourself, and the avoidance is what leaves you unprotected from your own unexamined assumptions, from the insecurity of never quite knowing what you actually believe or who you actually are, from the specific kind of groundlessness that comes from building your identity on positions that have never been tested and might not hold. Nietzsche's invitation, urgent and ungentle, is to stop protecting yourself from the very experiences that would build you into someone who actually has something to protect, to stop avoiding the friction that would show you what you're made of, to engage, honestly, fully, without the managed distance of someone who is more invested in maintaining agreeableness than in discovering truth. The self you'll find on the other side of that engagement, the self that has actually been tested and has held, is a genuinely different kind of self from the one that has been carefully protected from all challenge, more certain, not because certainty has been imposed, but because it has been earned, more grounded, not because the ground was given, but because it was found through the specific kind of search that genuine conflict makes possible. This is what Nietzsche means when he talks about the free spirit, not freedom from conflict, freedom through it, the specific, hard-won, genuinely substantive freedom of a person who knows from actual experience, not from theory, what they are.
There is a dynamic in human relationships that operates so constantly and so quietly that most people never notice it as a dynamic at all. They experience it simply as reality, as the way things are, as their own natural tendencies, as just how relationships work. But once Nietzsche names it, you see it everywhere. Here it is. In any relationship where one person consistently refuses to push back, where one person has made a pattern of accommodation, of smoothing over, of giving way whenever tension arises, power flows steadily and inevitably towards the other person, not necessarily through any malicious intention, not necessarily through any awareness on either side that this is what's happening. But the flow is real, and its effects are real,
and they accumulate over time in ways that eventually become impossible to ignore. The person who never pushes back has, in effect, communicated something. Through the accumulated pattern of their behavior, through the consistent willingness to give way, to accommodate, to let things go whenever tension arises, they have communicated, "My preferences are negotiable. My boundaries are suggestions. My sense of what matters can be overridden without significant consequence." And other people respond to this communication, not always consciously, often with the best intentions, but they respond to it by expanding, by taking up more space, by assuming more, by expecting more accommodation, by pushing further in directions that have consistently yielded. This is not predation, it's just the natural response of a social organism to the space that's available. And the person who has been accommodating throughout this process, who has been gradually moved further and further from their own center by the slow accumulation of given way moments, often wakes up at some point with a bewildering sense of not being recognized, of not being seen, of being treated as though their preferences don't matter, as though their perspective is irrelevant, as though they're somehow less present in the relationship than the other person is. But they communicated through their behavior over time that this was acceptable. They trained the dynamic, even while hating it. And the training happened not through any single dramatic moment, but through the 1,000 small moments of backing down. Nietzsche's analysis of this cuts even deeper than the interpersonal level. He looked at the cultural and moral frameworks that produce conflict-avoiding people and saw something that disturbed him profoundly. That certain moral systems that praise meekness, that elevate self-effacement as a virtue, that teach people that pushing back is aggression and accommodation is love, are themselves forms of social control, not accidental control, systematic control, embedded in the values themselves. He called this the morality of the herd, and his analysis of how it functions is one of the most uncomfortable things he ever wrote. Uncomfortable because it implicates not just individual psychology, but the moral frameworks most people have absorbed so thoroughly they experience them as their own deepest convictions. The herd morality in Nietzsche's account has a specific function: to contain the exceptional, to prevent the genuinely different, genuinely strong, genuinely self-directed person from asserting themselves in ways that disrupt the average, to make sure that no one gets too far out of line with what everyone else is comfortable with. And the mechanism for this is not brute force, it is moralization, the transformation of conformity into virtue and deviation into sin. When a culture consistently teaches that people who assert themselves are selfish, that people who disagree are difficult, that people who push back are aggressive, that people who hold their own positions under social pressure are stubborn, what it is actually doing is making it morally dangerous to be a genuine self. It is making the assertion of selfhood feel like a character flaw. It is making the person who refuses to accommodate not just socially uncomfortable, but morally wrong. And this, Nietzsche found, is remarkably effective, because the person who might have resisted external pressure can almost always be broken by internal moral pressure. Tell someone that what they want to do will hurt other people, that it's selfish, that it's not what a good person does, and the compliance rate goes up dramatically, because most people care genuinely and deeply about being good. And if goodness is defined as self-erasure, as endless accommodation, as never pushing back, then self-erasure becomes not just a strategy, but an identity. The person who has fully absorbed this framework doesn't experience themselves as controlled, they experience themselves as virtuous. They have internalized the controlling value so completely that their own moral self-concept is now organized around the behavior that keeps them contained. Every time they swallow a disagreement, they feel not the loss of agency, but the satisfaction of being a good person. The system has successfully gotten them to police themselves. Nietzsche's response to this, and it was fierce, it was urgent, it was deliberately provocative, was to call it what he thought it was, a sophisticated form of spiritual slavery, not imposed from outside, worn from within, the chains made of moral concepts rather than iron, which makes them far harder to see and far harder to remove. The path out of this, in his analysis, does not begin with a dramatic act of rebellion. It begins with something more fundamental, the willingness to look at the moral framework you've inherited and ask, honestly, without the automatic deference that the framework itself trains you to offer, does this actually reflect something I genuinely believe, or am I complying with something I was given without examination? Not every received moral value is wrong. Nietzsche was not saying that all moral frameworks are equally meaningless, or that self-assertion is always right and accommodation is cowardice. He was saying that a moral framework you've never examined is not actually yours. It is an instrument of whoever gave it to you. And a morality that consistently works against your genuine interests, your genuine selfhood, your genuine freedom, deserves to be examined with considerably more skepticism than most people bring it to. The specific examination he was calling for in this context is this: where in your life have you conflated conflict avoidance with virtue? Where have you told yourself that giving way was kindness when it was actually fear? Where have you experienced the quiet satisfaction of being good by making yourself smaller, and not noticed that the goodness you were feeling was the approval of a system that benefits from your smallness? These are not comfortable questions. They're designed not to be. The philosopher's hammer, remember, is for testing what's solid. And the things we're most certain are solid, our moral convictions, our sense of who the good person is, our picture of what love and care and maturity look like, those are exactly what most need to be tested. Because a freedom that depends on never being pushed, never pushing back, never occupying space in ways that might generate friction, that is not freedom. It is a very comfortable, very moralized, very well-justified version of control. And Nietzsche wanted you to see it before you'd spent too many years calling it virtue.
This one tends to land with particular force because it inverts something that most people hold as a fundamental measure of a healthy relationship: the absence of conflict. Most people, when they evaluate whether a relationship is going well, use some version of this metric. Are we getting along? Is there peace? Are things smooth? Are we mostly agreeing, mostly comfortable, mostly moving through our time together without significant friction? And this metric is not entirely wrong. A relationship characterized by constant, destructive, unresolved conflict is genuinely damaged. The presence of friction is not by itself a sign of a good relationship. But Nietzsche would point to something more precise and considerably more unsettling. A relationship with no friction at all,
in which everything is consistently smooth, in which conflict is consistently avoided, in which neither person ever really pushes back against the other, is also not a good relationship. It is, in a very specific sense, not a relationship between two real people at all. Because two actual people, when they genuinely meet, when both are actually present, actually bringing themselves, actually engaging rather than managing, will inevitably have friction, will inevitably see things differently, will inevitably have moments where their genuine responses diverge, where what one person actually thinks collides with what the other person actually thinks, where someone needs to say something that the other person isn't going to entirely like hearing. The relationship that cannot contain this is not a relationship in which both people are actually present. It is a relationship in which at least one person, usually the more conflict-averse one, is performing a version of themselves that is specifically designed not to generate friction. And the person they're performing with cannot genuinely love the performer, cannot see them, cannot know them, cannot actually meet them, because what's being presented is a surface rather than a self. Nietzsche had a particular respect for friendships and relationships characterized by what he called honest enmity, and this phrase taken out of context sounds strange and even alarming. But what he meant by it was more nuanced and more beautiful than it first appears. The relationship in which both people respect each other enough to actually tell the truth, to actually disagree when they disagree, to actually push back when pushing back is warranted, to actually say the hard thing rather than protecting the peace at the cost of genuine contact. He distinguished this sharply from what he called relationships of convenience, relationships in which what's being maintained is not genuine connection, but a comfortable arrangement, in which both parties have implicitly or explicitly agreed not to make too many demands on each other's honesty, not to push too hard into territory that might generate friction, not to be so genuinely themselves that the other person's comfortable self-image might be disturbed. These relationships feel safe, they feel easy, they feel often like very good relationships until something happens that requires genuine honesty, genuine support, genuine willingness to say the difficult thing. And in that moment, the arrangement reveals itself as what it was, not a relationship between two people, a mutual comfort system, an agreement to be agreeable, which turns out to be no kind of agreement worth much at all. Think about the people in your own life who have told you things you genuinely didn't want to hear, who pushed back when you were wrong, who didn't simply validate your feelings when your feelings were steering you wrong, who maintained their honest perspective even when maintaining it made the conversation harder. Those people, the ones who created friction when friction was what the situation called for, are the ones who were actually present, the ones who cared enough for you to be honest rather than comfortable. And think about the conversations you've had, maybe with those people, maybe in other contexts, where something real was at stake, where genuine disagreement was on the table, where you and another person were actually in contact, actually meeting, actually engaging with the substance of something that mattered. What was the quality of those conversations compared to the smooth, easy, frictionless exchanges where nothing real was at stake? There is a different quality of aliveness in genuine conflict, Not pleasant aliveness, uncomfortable sometimes, but the specific kind of aliveness that comes from actual engagement, from being genuinely present, genuinely called upon, genuinely met by another genuine self. The opposite of the flat, managed quality of interactions where everyone is carefully maintaining the smooth surface. Nietzsche saw this in the most profound relationships of history and literature and his own experience. The great friendships, the ones that actually produced something in both them, that left both of them more developed, more refined, more genuinely themselves, were almost always characterized by significant friction, by the willingness to disagree, to challenge, to push, to say the thing that was true rather than the thing that was comfortable. He had such a friendship himself, briefly, with Richard Wagner, a relationship of enormous creative and intellectual productivity, and also of fundamental, irresolvable disagreement. When it ended through honest confrontation. Nietzsche's critique of Wagner was among the most honest and most devastating things he ever wrote, and it cost him deeply. But the friendship, in its intensity and its genuine friction, had produced things in both of them that no comfortable relationship could have generated. The practical implication of this for how you relate to the people in your life is not that you should manufacture conflict, not that you should look for opportunities to disagree, to push, to make things difficult, but that the relationships worth investing in, the ones that have the potential to be genuinely nourishing, genuinely deep, genuinely mutual, are the ones you can be honestly yourself in, where you can bring your actual perspective, hold it under pressure, update it when updating is warranted, and trust that the relationship is strong enough to contain the friction of genuine contact. And where that's not possible, where the relationship requires you to consistently be smaller than you are, quieter than you are, more accommodating than is honest, that is not a relationship worth calling deep. It is an arrangement, a comfortable arrangement possibly, but not the kind of genuine human contact that Nietzsche saw as one of the primary goods available to a human being. The relationships that matter, the ones that actually build you, are the ones you can actually be met with, fully, including the parts of you that sometimes push back.
We come finally to the deepest layer of what Nietzsche was pointing at when he insisted that the fear of conflict is incompatible with genuine freedom. The popular understanding of freedom, the one embedded in most modern liberal thinking about what it means to live well, is essentially negative. Freedom as the absence of constraint. Freedom from interference, from pressure, from the impositions of others on your choices and your life. The free person in this picture is the person who has successfully cleared enough space around them that they can do what they want without too much resistance. This is a real and valuable thing. Nietzsche didn't deny it, but he saw it as profoundly insufficient, as a beginning at best, and as an illusion at worst. Because here is what negative freedom, freedom from interference, cannot do. It cannot tell you who you are. It cannot give you a direction. It cannot produce the internal coherence that makes genuine choice possible. It cannot build the self that freedom is supposed to be good for. The person who has successfully arranged their life to minimize conflict, who has structured their world so that almost nothing ever pushes against them, who lives in the carefully maintained peace of someone who has made themselves agreeable enough to avoid all significant friction, this person is not free in any sense that matters. They are comfortable. They are undisturbed.
They are living in a kind of elaborate protective arrangement that looks like freedom from the outside and feels from the inside like a form of imprisonment so subtle that it has no obvious name. The imprisonment is this: a self that has never been tested does not know its own shape, does not know what it can endure, what it will not endure, what it stands for, what it will resist when resistance matters. It lives in a kind of permanent softness, not the softness of genuine compassion, but the softness of something that has never been called upon to be hard, that has been arranged so carefully against the necessity of hardness that it has lost the capacity for it. And this softness, this untested, undiscovered softness, is genuinely unfree, because genuine choice requires the capacity to say no, to hold a position, to remain yourself under pressure, to not simply become whatever the current social environment finds most convenient. And that capacity, the capacity to be genuinely yourself under pressure, is built only through the experience of actually being under pressure, actually being pushed, actually having to find out in the specific heat of genuine conflict whether you have a self at all. Nietzsche's concept of freedom is positive rather than negative, not freedom from something, but freedom toward something, the freedom to become who you actually are, which requires as its foundation knowing who you actually are, and which requires as the condition of knowing the willingness to be tested, to be pushed, to enter into the specific kind of friction that shows you with unflinching clarity what holds and what gives way. He called this Selbstüberwindung, self-overcoming, and he saw it as the central movement of genuine human life, the movement by which a person becomes, through their own active effort and their own willingness to be challenged, something genuinely more than they were, not more comfortable, more actual, more specific, more genuinely themselves in a way that has been tested and has held. This self-overcoming is impossible without conflict, not the manufactured, performative conflict of someone who picks fights for self-assertion's own sake, but the genuine, unavoidable conflict that arises whenever a real self occupies space in a world full of other real selves and genuine circumstances that don't arrange themselves conveniently. The capacity to meet that conflict, to stay present in the friction, to hold your position when holding it matters, and update it when updating it is honest, to be genuinely yourself in the face of genuine resistance, is not a personality trait. It is not something you either have or don't have, something innate and fixed. It is a capacity that is built, developed through use, grown through the accumulated experience of actually engaging rather than consistently retreating. And here is the deepest thing Nietzsche observed about this capacity. It is the foundation of all the other freedoms that matter. The freedom to love well without losing yourself in the process. The freedom to create without being deflected by the fear of other people's reactions. The freedom to build something genuinely yours in a direction genuinely chosen towards something that actually matters to you, rather than in the direction of least social resistance toward whatever generates the most approval. All of these freedoms rest on the same foundation, a self that knows its bone shape, that has been tested and has held, that can be present in conflict, genuinely present, genuinely engaged, without being dissolved by it. That self is not given, it is built, and the materials for building it are exactly the ones that conflict avoidance keeps you from. Now, what does this actually mean for how you live? not philosophically, concretely. It means that the next time you feel the familiar pull toward accommodation, the reflex to smooth things over, to soften the position, to give way before the friction arrives, you pause, not to manufacture a fight, but to ask, is this genuine flexibility or is this fear? Am I updating my position because I'm genuinely persuaded or because the resistance is uncomfortable? Am I accommodating because this relationship genuinely calls for it, or because I'm protecting myself from the experience of being genuinely met? These are not easy questions to answer honestly. The self-justifying stories come quickly and they come fluently. Nietzsche's recommendation, if he could be said to make recommendations, would be to develop the habit of asking them anyway, to develop a relationship with your own discomfort that is curious rather than purely avoidant, to practice in small ways first and larger ways over time the experience of staying present in friction rather than immediately seeking the exit, and to notice over time, with accumulating experience, what actually happens when you do. Whether the relationship you were protecting from friction actually survives the honesty and becomes something more real. Whether the belief you were protecting from challenge actually holds under pressure and becomes genuinely yours. Whether the self you were protecting from the risk of conflict actually turns out to be something solid, something that can be met with full force and still be recognizably, irreducibly, specifically you. Nietzsche believed it could be. He believed that the self, the genuine, particular, tested self, is not fragile, is not the kind of thing that needs to be carefully protected from all contact with the resistant world, is, in fact, more resilient, more coherent, more fully itself, precisely because it has been willing to be challenged. The freedom he was pointing at is not comfortable. It is not smooth. It does not feel from the inside like the peace you've been told you should want. It feels like knowing who you are. And there is nothing in Nietzsche's entire philosophy, across all the suffering and clarity and ferocious honesty of his life, that he valued more.
Let's end where we began, with the version of you that never says the thing you actually mean. You know what that thing is. Right now, you know. The conversation you've been arranging your life around not having. The position you've been softening for long enough that you're not sure you remember what the unfiltered version actually is. The relationship in which you've been making yourself small for so long that small has started to feel like your actual size. The disagreement you've been swallowing for months or years because the cost of saying it out loud has always seemed higher than the cost of keeping it down. You've been paying a price for the avoidance. You know this, even if you haven't been calling it that. The hollow feeling, the background resentment, the vague, persistent sense of not being fully recognized, not realizing that recognition requires showing up fully, and that you've been strategically not showing up in exactly the places where showing up would require you to be seen. Nietzsche's challenge to you is not to become someone different, not to become brave in a way that doesn't fit you, confrontational in a way that doesn't fit your nature, aggressive in a way that doesn't actually reflect what you value. His challenge is more specific, and if you take it seriously, more demanding than any of that. His challenge is to become more genuinely yourself,
to let your actual perspective, the one that exists beneath the accommodations, beneath the strategic agreeableness, beneath the performance of whatever version of you generates the least friction, to let that perspective have its expression, its real expression, in the conversations and relationships and contexts where it has been carefully suppressed. Not all at once, not dramatically, not as a project of self-assertion for its own sake, but as an ongoing, deliberate practice of showing up more fully, of staying in the friction a little longer before retreating, of finding out what it feels like to actually say the thing, not the softened version, not the version designed to be maximally acceptable, the actual thing, and to discover what actually happens. What you'll find, what Nietzsche believed you'll find, and what most people who have worked through this have confirmed, is that what actually happens is almost never as catastrophic as the fear suggested. The relationship that seemed like it could not contain your honest self turns out often to be more resilient than you gave it credit for. The disagreement that seemed like it would break something turns out often to be the thing that finally made the connection real. The position you'd been protecting through silence turns out, when you actually articulate and defend it, to be something you actually believe and were right to hold. Or, and this is equally valuable, you discover that you were wrong, that the challenge was well aimed, that your position, once tested, had a weakness you hadn't seen, and that the encounter with that weakness, uncomfortable as it was, left you with something more honest and more genuinely yours than the untested position you'd been holding. Either way, whether the position holds or gives way, you come out of it knowing more about what you're made of, more familiar with the shape of your own self, more capable through the specific exercise of having stayed in the friction, of being genuinely yourself the next time the friction arrives. That is what Nietzsche meant by freedom. Not the freedom of a life from which all resistance has been cleared, the freedom of a self that has been tested by resistance and has come to know through the testing what it actually is. That self, the one on the other side of the conflict you've been avoiding, is already there. It is not a future version of you. It is you as you actually are, underneath the accumulated accommodations, waiting with what Nietzsche might call remarkable patience for you to stop protecting it so carefully and start actually using it. The conflict you're avoiding is not the enemy of that self. It is the door.